in the Midwest, which has been very nice, and I've gotten used to the cold, which is fine. I did my graduate work at Clemson University, and while I was there, I majored, or I decided that photography was going to be my element of study because I've always been interested in it, and I learned the principles of it and worked with it, and I was really involved with stray photography, Walker Evans. You couldn't do any better than Walker Evans or Ansel Adams or any of those significant photographers, and I primarily was interested in black and white photography, and that's what I did. However, I was introduced to lots of alternative forms of photography dealing with older methods or early methods of photography where scientists actually worked with it, trying to put together various kinds of compounds that were light sensitive and creating imagery from that. And I really found that to be interesting, and my first concern about that was because when I was in college, undergraduate school, I was really interested in combining the drawn element with a photographic element, and this is pre-Photoshop. So I wanted to find a way of melding them together, and I thought that working with alternative forms like cyanotype, brown print, Van Dyke prints, platinum prints, which allowed me to use different kinds of paper rather than just photographic paper, would allow me to blend my imagery together. And I did a lot of that. That's what I was concerned about, as well as making marks on photographic paper. Now, my background, we go back a little bit, in my undergraduate days was illustration and graphic design, so I was not doing what you see around here. So I was basically interested in becoming more of a commercial illustrator, and that was my ideal. I was going to move to New York and work at an agency. However, that didn't happen. I ended up moving to Boston after graduating undergraduate school, and I ended up working at a greeting card company, which I don't think exists anymore, but it was called Rustcraft Greeting. And I was part of the many, many artists that worked there, and I realized that it was like a factory. You know, like one person did this, one person did that. You put on a conveyor belt almost, and maybe somebody touched this, it never looked like from the beginning. You know, so all the inspiration came from the writers to begin with, and then it moved along to various artists or art directors, and they gave it to you, and then it got shuffled around. So the work never looked like what you thought it was going to look like, but you know, you worked, and everybody was glad to have a job, especially in those days when in the 70s, when things were a little bit tight in the art market. The Vietnam War was raging, and things were not easy. So, but I learned things there. I learned a lot of discipline, and I did learn some photographic techniques there that allowed me the understanding of doing reproduction work. So that inspired me to a degree, and I ended up, while living in Boston, I also taught at a junior college and did a variety of other stints, and which gave me a background. So when I moved to South Carolina, I ended up going to graduate school, and I thought photography would certainly do what I needed to do. So finally, after I graduated, got my master's degree, my MFA, I ended up getting a job at a really wonderful school teaching. It was a magnet school for the arts. It was in Greenville, South Carolina, and I taught photography there for about 13, 14 years to high school students. And it was a school that, and it still continues today, which is highly, I would have liked to have gone to a school like that, because the students go half a day for every day of the week, and when they finish, their portfolios are astounding, and as though they had gone to college already, because we really, all the faculty was just unbelievably wonderful. So it allowed me also to experiment side by side with them, and I had small classes, so I could really introduce wild and crazy things, and we just did all sorts of, I said, let's try this, and I would try, because I had never tried it either, so we all tried a variety of things, and once they learned how to how to create things that were of quality, and then they learned how to break rules, and I said rule breaking was one of my most important aspects of how I taught. So I thought that to myself too. I said, how can I break all the rules? And that's always in the back of my mind. How can I change it? How can I break those rules so it becomes mine, and it's not, and it changes a new way of looking at it. So that's primarily in the back of my mind every time I do something. How can I look at it in a different way? Maybe reinterpret it, just be inspired differently. So I found myself sort of at a crossroads. I moved to South Carolina, I moved to Nebraska, and I began to start again, and I joined the 13th Street Gallery, which was at the Hot Shops. I had a studio there. I got together with other artists, and we sort of, we encourage ourselves having shows all the time, which is encouraging you to make new work constantly. So that was an important basis of that. And I found myself at a certain point, I'm going, well, you know, I can make straight prints, I could do this, I could do that. And I decided that, you know, I needed to give myself artistic license to change how I looked at my work. So I said, you know, I had all these wonderful, I had a dark room, I could create pristine prints and make them look as good, maybe close to Ansel Adams. I could do a variety of things like that. But it's not getting me anywhere. I wasn't inspired anymore. So I decided, why not? What would happen if I tore them up? What would happen if I tore up my negatives? What would happen if I got, like, used all the negatives up into a piece of work? That's a possibility. And I kept on thinking about those things. I said, okay, you know, I'm just going to take these prints that are just so beautiful, and I started tearing them up literally. And I felt so liberated. I gave myself permission. And it says, now I'm tearing them in strips and pieces and whatever. And I started combining them or recombining them with other prints and creating a different type of narrative. Now I'm creating stories in some form, where I said, well, you know, I've given myself the license to do this. I've broken all these rules. I've changed it. I have put fire to them. I have burned them. I have added other pigments to them. And I'm looking at the results. And in some form, I was looking at a sort of scientific experiment to see what would happen to these pieces of paper that I was really just also negating the image that was on there. I was just looking at the point, my point of departure there was looking at the gray values. I was looking at things that were like light gray, middle gray, dark, you know, and I was just collecting pieces of paper in different bundles of the values and seeing how I could do this. So literally I was creating pieces that were almost mosaic-like, that would just, almost like a project going from light to dark, dark to light, and creating just values. And that was all I wanted to do. And I'm burning them and putting fire to these things and seeing what the silver content on the paper, how it changed the gradation of the paper, because it does, because it's got a metal in it. So when you put fire to it, it began to create this type of coloration or deteriorated metallic quality on it. And I enjoyed that. So I did a lot of that. So I continued working with that in many different ways and forms, and I continued working in the darkroom, working with another type of photography, which is called a photogram, where it's really, when you're beginning to study photography, you begin to look at the primary ways of doing it. And it's if you put an object down on a photosensitive piece of paper, it could be anything, and put light to it, and then process it, then you have a silhouetted type image. And that's, I never got tired of looking at that. I'm going, this is just, you know, I would just throw everything on it. And I would run classes with it. And I said, everything I did, I just liked it all. I liked all these objects on there. And I'm going, well, I'm sort of doing like, you know, all these silhouettes are just creating stories, you know, somehow. They're little people, little things, whatever, flowers, plant life, anything I would throw on paper. And I always got excited about it. So that was like, I knew I was very interested in that. There's an artist, Kara Walker, who is a black female artist, who does, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she does a lot of black silhouetted images that depict slavery. And she's a well-known artist, and her stuff is quite large, small, whatever, and she only does them in black. And I realized, okay, I'm a white artist doing, and my image is always white, because they do the opposite of what the paper does. And I just happened to be there, and I kept on saying, oh, you know, is somebody going to like criticize me for this or what? I don't know. You're always thinking about that. So but hers are significantly different because they're not designy, although they look designy. They are talking about a very bad particular period in our history. And she does it in quite a wonderful style. But mine were technically what they were just doing because of the mechanical process of this photogram. So in my head, I'm always thinking about what something might look like if I put it onto paper and expose it to light, and I've tried lots of stuff. So I got excited about that too. And so then I said, okay, so I've got that far, so I can do other things. And so I'm only telling you about technical stuff right now because it's all technically driven to begin with. And then as I get involved into creating a piece of work, I sort of get sucked into it, and I feel like I'm part of it. I think a lot of artists feel like that. You become like a character in it, or you get the color sucks you in. It's a very emotional kind of experience when you get involved. And if I have these objects in there, I'm going, yeah, how do I feel in it? How's that thing? You know, does that structure give me what I want? And so I began to apply other materials onto the surface, such as paint and holes and grommets and staples, and I think that's most of it. I don't know. But I had done that earlier. I started drilling holes into paper like 20 some years ago because I liked the punctured look. And I did it aggressively, I did it less aggressively, and I wanted to see how that would work with that surface. It was tension, it was creating another surface, and I liked that quality. So as I continued working, nothing was left to question, because I would try everything available. Anything was in my studio, I would incorporate almost into, maybe not just into the surface, but basically as a photographic element on top of paper that would give me something. So I'm going to discuss some of the work here because this is the present show, and to tell you what I was thinking about and where that goes. So basically, a lot of my work, as I say, it's photographically based. However, it doesn't look like it. I mean, you couldn't say these are photographically based. Everything up to this point are photographically based. And they're collaged, if you want to use that word. There are layers and layers of black and white photographic paper that is layered on there and then attached, then painted over, then drilled into it and put color into it until I feel I've gotten to where I wanted to go. Also, how do I come up with these themes is another point where I look at the work, I listen to public radio in my studio because or jazz or some music that I particularly like, but the information on public radio just sort of drives me. I keep hearing all these things. I'm going, I have a reaction. And either it's usually about women being mistreated around the world, which drives me crazy, or events that are disasters, or things that people should have learned a long time ago and they haven't. So I think about it a lot as I work. I sit there and go, something needs to be done about it. So as I go into some of the work here, I'll begin over there. These are like dialogues. I call these visual dialogues, where I'm trying to say something to you, and various people get different things out of the work. Whereas this one is called Women's Health Care. And there's a problem, as we know about health care these days, that it is, they're trying to clear it up, they're trying to make it available to most people, and women on the poor end of the scale are still having problems with it. And women, there's a life force, in this one, there are two figures there, they're inverted. There's a blood life force that goes from one to the other because we live with blood. And it has to do with your internal structure. So women have uteruses, and they're life-giving, and then they're easily taken away as well. And and you're caught up in this whirlwind of whatever the health care you get. And ultimately, if you do have surgery, especially a lot of women who've had surgery and like a hysterectomy or whatever, you're stapled up. Staples in that one that signify that. So that was like the end thing. When I was doing that, I'm going, the staples they resonated with me, because I'm going, something so powerful as that. And because I used a powerful electric staple gun, which also gave it that gesture. And I felt that it was important for me to have that activity with it. That's the way I look at it. You may look at it totally differently, and that's okay with me. I began to also see, in terms of how I wanted to depict these panels, I also decided early on that I wanted to have a cradle, which is the depth of these panels. These panels are 2 inches, and I wanted the outside edges to be significant as well. They're part of it, so they're decorative, or they add to it because you go around it, and they just sort of frame it. So that's also an important part of it. So the next one over there, and I do a lot of feminist kinds of themes that, since I'm a woman, I know a lot about it. And so this one is titled Esther's Preparation for the King. So this goes back into biblical times. So this is Queen Esther, who was chosen to be the queen. The king was Ahasuerus, and he had a wife he didn't like, so he was getting rid of her. And he was looking around for a new wife, which they did a lot, and they probably still do. And so he was doing, there was a competition, or he had a call out for a new wife to be people to come in. And she was urged by her uncle Mordecai to come in and to audition. But I believe, according to my husband, who is a biblical scholar, had mentioned that he thought that all the women were nude. Even the old wife was nude, and all the new prospective wives also to be auditioned were nude. So I decided that while I was working on this piece, that it would be something significant into that relationship. I was creating this type of this bird image, almost like I wanted to do something with a gilded cage, like something's caught in a gilded cage, and these birds it's in a narrow panel, and these figures, there's a lot of photographic element in there which overlaps, and then I realized that you couldn't even see it anymore, so I had to repaint it, because there are overlapping figures beneath that are these nude women. So Esther's at the top, and she was said to have 7 servants to help her get ready for the king. Ultimately, she was picked, by the way. And she was picked for the ultimate challenge. And her uncle was very proud of her, because she was picked to be the queen, and she saved the Jewish people at that point, because they were going to be killed off. So that's the story. And these are hand servants beneath there, and then the birds and the trees are all sort of in a sort of compressed area, almost like in a cage, and that's what I want that to signify. There's one piece missing over here, but you might be able to see that later. But I deal with like events, and so this one deals with the human condition. There are 3 panels there that deal with ancient history of how people really, it's called bloodline, and how we're all sort of connected, and we're all sort of related to one another in a way. But in all this length of time in ancient history, we still haven't learned anything, because there's a human problem. There's a condition how we treat people, especially women. And women, women are considered to be, child producers in most cases, and they're like furniture in some cultures. And so this is sort of like a relationship, and I did another series dealing with that, but it's not in that. And then I go into other concerns that are environmental, that things that are pretty much evident, like Corey's dealing with the chicken, which is fantastic. I really like the colors, and just that spirit is wonderful. In the summertime, I live in Connecticut by the Long Island Sound, and I have a marsh in the back that ebbs and flows twice a day. There's a high tide twice a day. And since I've lived there, the high tide has gotten greater and greater because of the storms that have hit and significantly, the hurricanes. And so now the backyard, which when we first bought it, had a lot of backyard. Now when it's a high tide, it's like a lake. So there's always, the sandbars have driven it that way, and it's the problem of the erosion. So this piece deals with the high tide on a marsh, dealing with every time there's a high tide or a storm, things get pushed in, they float through, and there's a lot of stuff that comes around there. There's history there, and I see it all the time. So this is a lot of the stuff that's sort of the residue from the different tides that were left behind. And then in this particular piece, I'm dealing with a disaster. So this was the earthquake in Japan in 2011. And it was sort of a very freaky event for me because I was working on this piece and I really I knew I wanted to do certain things on this piece, and it has a lot of people in it, which are photograms that I cut out. And I knew I wanted to use that very acid green color. That immediately I knew that's what I wanted to use now. Now there's an oil-based paint. And I started making the piece, and I had this negative that I'd never used before, dealing with a bamboo forest. And I just loved the negative. And I said, I'd like to use that image. So I started scanning the images, because I just wanted to see what I could do in terms of a piece that was not darkroom created. So I was going to use a scanner and print it out myself. So this was actually in that format. So I started repeating the images with the bamboo forest, and laying them in there and creating all these people, and then I said, and I started this people just moving around, and they're standing around looking for something. I don't know what they're looking for. That is the problem. But they're just moving around, and then all of a sudden it occurred to me, each person needs a hole next to it. And so I drilled those holes in. I'm going, yeah, everybody's got a hole. And all of a sudden, the earthquake occurred. I'm going, oh my God, it's Japan. And I sort of freaked out. I'm going, this is like, I've never had a premonition before. And I said, every person has a hole to jump into as a shelter. And so I immediately looked for the fallout shelter, this that's symbol. And I added that to that because it was significant. Every person needed to have a place to go. And that's what it ended up being, basically, from that particular disaster, which I had no idea I was going to be doing that. And it led me right into that. So I'm going to start going, oh yeah, this is all about that, absolutely. I just didn't know, but I'm there. So a lot of work does that, as you're involved with it, and you're moving around these little characters, and especially in this, you're creating this type of, like a drama, almost theater, almost in these particular cases where I'm presenting a narrative for you, and so basically, I have no answer, but I gave them a place to jump into. That's all I can tell you. So. I've always been fascinated by Hieronymus Bosch, and there's a print down there at the end. He was a 14th, 15th century painter from the Netherlands, and he created this piece, this triptych, that was religiously inspired, and it deals with the creation, with the garden, and damnation. And the garden is actually the larger piece in the triptych, and I've studied it, I've looked at it, and I'm going, oh my God, the stuff in there is so risque that it's unbelievable that he did it in that particular time. The fact that the church allowed him to do that, he wasn't kicked out, and he created that piece. And I'm going, if you study it, you look at all these, it's hedonistic, absolutely. And I just sort of like the fact that he did it. I thought it was just incredible. So I decided that I was going to do one, and that this one was my interpretation of that central panel, which is a delightful garden. Mine's called Delightful Garden. So I have created a different kind of garden in my particular viewpoint, and I used darkroom methods in all of this, and I used real butterfly wings I put through the enlarger, and real orchids that I put through no negatives, and put them through the enlarger, and just started printing all this stuff up, and I wanted to create this type of fertility dance in a way, with these flowers, butterflies, and these figurative images in here. And in my interpretation, it begins at the bottom, and there's an image there of the female form there that is like the goddess of Willendorf, that is considered to be the first fertility goddess of ancient history. And so I use that form, and everything emanates from that, where a man is produced over there. And in my interpretation of my garden here, women are in charge. Without the women, there would not be a man. Okay, so basically it all emanates upwards, and then the man is produced. So, I really like this piece. I was really involved with the whole technical process of that. I wanted to make it gilded because of, the 15th century, where they wouldn't ever have anything that wasn't gilded. And so I wanted to add that to that as well, and make it, sort of flashy. And so that became that. I really, loved it. I wanted to, and I have that blood red running through all those figures, which I felt important to put in. When I finished it, I just needed that aggressive nature about it, so I added that to it. So, how do I get from here to here? That's the big question, because these do look so different. And I decided that I needed to lighten up, because I'm always dealing with dark subject matters and disasters or inhumanity of man or this and that. I said I just want to have some fun with some stuff, and I decided that I was going to go into a different direction for this show. And I may go on further, I don't know. However, these series of 8 are called Revisiting the Garden. So they come from this particular piece. They continue. Now in this, there are all the figures in there I had created, not all of them, but I decided, I drew out these figures and cut them out, and I was going to use them in this panel in color, but I just did not like them. And I decided to go neutrally into black figures, and I put them away. And I started figuring out what I was going to do with this body of work. First of all, I looked at the panels, and I originally thought I was going to do 20 or 16 individual panels. Originally it was going to be 20 individual panels. I said, am I crazy? Okay, so I said, maybe I'll connect them. So I started playing around in the darkroom and decided that I was going to connect the 2 panels together and study them for a while, and looked at them on the wall, and I love the way they jump off the wall. They're sort of floating. So that became an important element that also brought the sides to importance as well as the front. Okay? So they become like a little step. Now in this particular case, I decided to see how far I could get with this, and I didn't know how. I knew I was going to do at least 8 or 10 or whatever to see how far I could move them. So these are not at all photographic. There's no photographic aspect to these. These I took apart. I took design elements from Japanese motifs from kimonos that were published, and I cut them up and reconfigure them, and started adding figures, started adding fruits, started adding all these objects to them, where I began to create this type of these narratives that are looking to modern love. But I also, now I'm going to get this back again. John, where am I? Okay. If you look over here, these are Persian miniatures from the 15th century. And I used to go, when we lived in Boston, I used to go to the Frog Museum, which is part of Harvard. I used to go there on Saturdays and just look around. And they had a collection of Persian miniatures there. I just liked looking at them because they were so finely made. And I would just go look at them all the time. I thought they were sort of interesting. And they were so detailed, and they had these little narratives going on. And I didn't realize, I mean, I've always sort of gone back to that, and lots of other work I've done, but it always stays in your mind, and they're very colorful. So if you look at it as a grouping, the colors, and they seem to work in similar fashion. They're doing different things in everyone, but there's something about it that really, it came out subliminally. I didn't even know that. So as I began to look at my work, I said, okay, I'm going to redefine this whole garden of earthly delights. It's going to be a modern take on it because there are lots of situations here that are very modern, but maybe old as well, because now we're talking about it more where they didn't talk about then. And so I realized that I was taking I'm making my own, narrative in terms of my own little miniature narrative, and creating a sort of a modern twist on it, okay, with the way it hangs. And I decided to use these the figures and the highly decorative Japanese textile motifs all fell together as I started placing them together, and they created these modern narratives of modern love. And then when I completed it, and I looked at them together, you don't know until you begin to look at your work and it's finished, and you're going, what was I doing? Because you're sort of involved in a sort of manic kind of thing. And then I said, okay, so it became really apparent to me that, these Persian, back in my mind, I had these Persian miniatures, which, and it was a pleasant surprise, by the way, that I saw that I blended the 14th and 15th century Dutch, the Garden of Earthly Delights, and the Persian miniatures into, they were from 14th, 15th century, into a sort of a Matisse-like 19th century influence. I was influenced by Matisse in his cutout shapes. And I've created a 21st century modern love narrative that is sort of a culmination of all of this stuff. And as I said that, I'm going, I guess all the art history that I had studied in undergraduate school and graduate school has never left me. It's been subliminal. I mean, I was taught well because it keeps creeping back. And all of these pieces, everything I've done, I forgot to mention, with all the mixed media that I use on that, wax is probably the thing that a lot of people comment on because it's on the surface. The reason I use wax is because it's like a diffusing element. It's a clear wax, it's a white paraffin, and it dulls it. It sort of takes it away from the actuality of how it was done, and it sort of gives you this very floaty kind of image. So it goes in and out. So all of them have wax on it in one form or the other. Some a little thicker, some less. If you look at this one, the Esther piece, you see a lot of wax on the surface that's actually kept there for dripping purposes, and some not. So these all have wax in them as well. And that is my presentation. Thank you. Any questions? I may have solved it all.
You've been working your tail off.
Thank you, sweetie.
I really didn't notice the sides until you started mentioning. I know they're there.
Yeah.
But I didn't look as closely.
They're all different, and if you look at it, it's really fun. I have to photograph. If you look at them this way, they're fun because then they begin to evolve. It changes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that was, I didn't know that was actually going to be, and I tried to make each side different. There's some repeating ones, but they are also from kimono motifs, black and white ones. So I tried to, I had these really nice resources for that.
You notice it. Go ahead.
Tell them about your fortune with getting the second Japanese.
There's a publication now. It's Pepin Press, and I purchased. I originally had a book that had black and white Japanese motifs that I have used. It has a CD-ROM that comes with it, so you could print them. and you can change sizes. And I had like nice graphic black and white ones, and so I used to use those a lot. And then I was looking online, so I wanted to get a color images. So I got it. Oh my God! It came in the mail. The whole CD was cracked. And I'm going, how can they mail it like that? You know? And I said, that's not usable. So they mailed me another one. So I said, oh, I got 2 books. So it was well printed. So I took apart that one book, and those are in here. I cut it all up and reassembled it. I mean, they don't look like that because I've combined and changed them, opened them up, add a lot of stuff to it. But it gave me. It just gave me this opportunity to do anything, you know, and I loved it. You know, I just spread them all out, and said, I'm going to use this one, that one, see how that looks with this, and it made it playful, you know. So I had a great time working with this because it was just fun. It was fun to see how much I could get into one panel, you know, because they're small, and to see how much I could create a difference from one panel to the next. So the last panel has got everybody on it. All the figures in it.
All the figures are down there.
Yeah, all the figures are in there. And so almost like, I mean, that's not damnation. This one, maybe because Apple is being exchanged there. So that is like, you know, like the Adam and Eve kind of thing, but you got Adam and Adam over there. And, so you've got lots of things changed. The difference also in these figures is that I've added arms to all these figures. They're all hugging each other, where in these they don't have arms. And so I wanted them to sort of like envelop each other and stuff like that.
And if the arms are there, they're hanging out.
Yeah, they would be somehow.
Question, when you say you're layering all this stuff, pick any one of them. Is there 5 layers, 10 layers?
Oh my God, you know, it's like a lot of stuff happening. I don't know, as I work on it, I have lots of paper. It's all paper. And so I know the figures are going to go on there. I don't know how many, when I'm working on it, I don't exactly know how many figures I will use. But then as I got into the middle of it, I'm going, oh yeah, they're going to increase. You know, they're going to have more in it.
Okay, and along with that, I'm looking at all of them, wondering how you got it to look so flat. I would think, you know, with that many layers, you'd have so many ups and downs.
Paper's thin. It's not that thick. You know, so it's
The wax that makes it look flat.
the wax makes it nice and smooth, you know, and it just sort of solidifies the whole thing. Although it looks pretty good before too, because I mean, once you're gluing it and stuff, it's you know, it's a lot of detail work. But and then I use some you know, old encyclopedias. I looked under fruit. I just look in the F. You know? and I just happened to have them there. So I looked, oh, okay, not too many fruits, but it gave me diagrams of the, and I said, oh, great, this is perfect, because those became the sexual elements in it. And so, so I've got a lot of, dissected, I guess, fruits. And so everything sort of happened, you know, like as I started looking for it, I'm going, yeah, I like that, you know. And I started scanning all those up into, they're all archival, so I started scanning things as an archival-based printout. And even at the end, I happened to go to Florida in between. And I went to Art Basel, so anything goes there. So I saw a lot of stuff. And then I was at a new museum called the Perez Museum. And in the shop, they had all this, you know, tchotchkes and stuff like that. And these tiny little alligators and tiny flamingos. I'm talking little ones like this. And they were flexible. And I was going to attach them to that. I was going to have these things sticking out or doing something. But I actually stuck them to the scanner. I put them into the scanner and started scanning all these alligators and flamingos and reducing them or enlarging them and using those too. And I'd never used the actual ones, but you know, they worked in this context. So, you know, whatever I find, I'm always looking for little trinkets and things that sort of happen to might work. They may work. So what I'm saying is, I used to go into the dark room and take all the stuff that I'd collect. I mean, I would clean out kitchens, and I used to go to like hardware stores and pick all this interesting stuff and throw it on photo paper and create these beautiful photograms. But now I'm using a scanner, so it's a little different, you know, with that. I mean, I still love those original photograms. I'm not getting that intensity, but I have to look at it differently since I gave up the darkroom. Any other questions? And my panel maker is Mike right there.
Whatever she wants.
That's right, we talk about it, yeah. I think they look really nicely presented here. I really do like the way they look. My studio wall is not this big, so I always saw them compressed. And I really like the way they look very much. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah. Thank you.